Hello and welcome to Illuminated. This is a space for us to talk about books, not only how we connect to the book, but also how it helps us connect to the world around us. And today I want to talk to you about the book, How to Commit Postcolonial Murder. It's a novel by Nina McConigley. And I need to tell you the little story. I love sharing with you how I come to a book. And so in February, I received a little postcard from my local bookstore, a little happy birthday postcard. And it comes every year to their members, and it means you get a discount on a book. And so usually I have an indication of what book I want to buy that year, but this year I didn't. And so I got to just like browse around. And so I was in the bookstore looking around. I had an idea of some that I might want to see if they had it, just in case I didn't find anything, nothing jumped out at me. And I was at the section of the bookstore that always has a little gem for me. It's where I found the Book of I, the Queen of Swords. And so it's my lucky table. And I like to see what's on that table. And when I saw this one, the title really stood out to me, like How to Commit Postcolonial Murder. And so if you don't know this about me, when I was studying for my master's degree, I was studying like English and literature, and my area of interest was postcolonialism, like post-colonial literature. And the reason that is that what I was really interested in was settler colonialism, but that term and in the space wasn't there. And so I was trying to fit that into the post-colonial lens. But in fact, it was settler colonialism, and which in academia didn't really like take hold or really kind of come into what it is today until 2010. And so that was after my master's degree. It would later come and impact my MFA, but at the time didn't have that terminology there or the way of thinking about it within academia and the scholarship. It was all kind of linked to post-colonialism. And so, of course, a title that has post-colonialism, like post-colonial in it, is going to grab my attention. And so I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And so I kind of like look at the flap. And so to not give too much away, because the flap basically says this, it's the summer of 1986, and these two sisters, they welcome their aunt, uncle, and their cousin into their house into Wyoming. They have arrived from India, and all is going well until the sisters decide that it's time that their uncle dies, essentially. And so that is the story. So without giving too much away, because I don't want to give the narrative arc away, I want to talk a little bit more about the technique and the methodology used in this. So it is so rooted in the 80s that it was amazing. Down to the foods that talked about, like Honey Smacks and Yoplait and Tang, like all these things that were part of the era, like the part of what it was to live there. These things were just everywhere. And we get things like Trapper Keepers. We have the television shows that are going on. But the other thing is, so not only does she use the references of these things to keep you really rooted in place and make you feel like you are living a teenager life in 1986, she brings in form that also mirrors the time. So there are these quizzes in there, and for someone from the 80s, I immediately clicked in. These are like the magazine quizzes. And so if you haven't experienced that or you don't know what that is, like as a teenager, every magazine you got, there were quizzes, and it was like, how do you know you're in love, or how do you break up? Like, and we would use them as some divining tool to give us answers, to help us understand ourselves, to understand the world around us, to just be like, what's going on? I don't know what's happening. I'm going to use this quiz and it's going to solve all my problems. And so the fact that she put these quizzes in there, again, the tone and the voice is of a teenager in the 80s. And so, of course, a teenager in the 80s is going to go to quizzes to try to figure things out, to try to solve what's happening, to try to understand who they are and how they fit into that space. So I thought it was a brilliant ad in there. And the other fun thing is that some of them even take us into some of those cultural elements, like I was just mentioning about food and television shows. So this is a quiz on 155, and well, actually, the quiz starts on 154, but the one I want to talk about is number 5. So the quiz itself is, how do you deal with a broken heart? And question 5 is, do you reach out to your ex-partner after a breakup? A, rarely, unless necessary for closure. Pardon me, do you have any Grey Poupon? B, occasionally for closure or to check in. What you talking about, Willis? C, regularly, hoping to restore the relationship. How do you spell relief? So in these parentheses, we have these quotes that were in the culture, within the way we were speaking at the time. So we have 2 from ads, and then we have 1 from a television show. And so the fact that she kind of put those in there as she's writing these quizzes, again, it is the narrator of the book, a teenage girl in 1986 writing the quizzes. And so adding those in just kind of roots us back into that space of, oh, this is her way of also writing some understanding, but also getting us really rooted into place. And so I thought that was really fascinating. And at one point in time, I was like getting close to the end, and I just was like, oh, like how many pages are left? Kind of thing, like, how much longer can I stay in this space and stay with these characters? And I saw a drawing, and I was like, what is that? And you know me, I love when books push against the normal way to tell a narrative. And so I realized it was a mash board. And so if you don't know what mash is, it was like a game that we would play on a piece of paper. And mash stands for mansion, apartment, shack, home. And it was a space where you'd put in like who you're going to marry, how many kids you're going to have, what's your job going to be, where you're going to live, and like maybe what car you have. And then you use a spiral to figure out the number that you're going to be using in that space. Love that it's a spiral. I totally forgot about that until I saw the image of it. And so for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I'm just showing the MASH page so you can see the drawing on there. I think it's so cool. Anyway, so then you go through and you count through and you cross things out until you have 1 left in each category, and then that is telling your future. So once again, much like the magazine quizzes, we used MASH as this way to cheekily look at what could my future be and dream about that and what it is. In some way, another way of defining some answers. So it was just a way to really keep the reader rooted into the 80s of using these tools like the magazine quizzes, MASH, also the terminology, the things are happening at that time, the Challenger event, the food that everyone is really connected to at that time that no longer available. Also the shows, the TV shows. And so it really kind of kept us rooted into that space. So the tone of this and the narrator of this is a teenage girl. And so we really get that sense. And it is such a good representation of a teenage voice that it never felt like you got out of that. And so I loved that so much of the narrative was really connected to her sister and that relationship and what that meant. And then like how the world was happening around them. But through all of that, she was just really trying to stay connected to her sister. At one point, they camp outside. Another time, they are separated because she goes to camp and her sister stays at home. And so this idea of like, even though she's away from her, she's thinking about her and what that means. I think her sister at that time was in cheer camp or and had cheerleading stuff in the summer, which the cheers, oh my gosh, perfect. Absolutely 80s cheers. So I think that if you want to spend some time in the 80s, this is the perfect novel to kind of help you get rooted, to either go back memory lane or to just get a sense of what it was like living in the 80s.
a brief pause in programming to really offer my sincere thanks for you joining me here on the Lit Illuminated podcast, as well as all your support through likes and subscription and comments. It all matters for podcasts like this one. And I also just wanted to mention that Lit Illuminated is more than this podcast. There are other ways to get connected to literature and the way that it informs our lives. I offer workshops as well as MFA-like seminars. I do independent study as well as mentoring memoir writers. So if you're interested in getting more connected with Lit Illuminated, please check out RebeccaBeardsall.com. And thank you again for listening today.
There is an element here that I thought was really fascinating, that she creates chapters in here that are called You. The title of the chapter is You, and it is a direct address to the reader, the you. In some way, it creates a separation from the story that is happening and what's going on in the space. We're following her day to day, and then it will pause into this you chapter, and it will be like address you. It was also used as a tool to talk about bigger things outside of her personal narrative, to kind of address some things like colonialism, but to really come in and say, this is what you think, or this is what you might be thinking, and I'm going to clarify that. So always being aware of that push-pull between her story and the you that's listening to it, the you that's reading it. So the very first you section, I'm just going to read the first little bit of it. Says the title of the chapter is You, but before I give you that, before I tell you what happened, I have to give you this. Because you ask for it, I give it to you. Because you don't ask for it, I give it to you. Because you always seem to want to take what I give you and translate it into something else, something that fits your narrative, you can have it. Let's just say it. This story is for you. I know you want it to be a certain way. I get it. We all do. And don't worry, I'll give you that story. But before we go back, before I tell you all about the murder, about that year, I'll tell you this, just to get it out of the way. Here's what you want. Here's a list, so organized, so efficient. And then it proceeds to go through a list. And I was like, yes, what a brilliant way to make that connection, to make it very aware that there's somebody watching this, listening to the story and wanting to know more, wanting to get into those details. And, I've talked about this in the memoir space when someone writing their story says, I'm not telling you that. Like Maggie Smith and You Can Make This Place Beautiful goes, that's not for you. That was only for me. That was for my kids. You don't need to know that. It's much like that. It's like that step out of the narrative to address the reader, the you. And the other one that I thought was so impactful, and this was on 74 and 75, and the two you sections are right next to each other. And this is you're uncomfortable now, I'm sorry. The next you chapter is you're uncomfortable now, I'm not sorry. And they're right next to each other. It's kind of like you read one and go right into the next. And it's like, sorry, not sorry, but putting it in the middle of the book. It's like in the middle, this perfect space of, I've now told you my story. Oops, you're uncomfortable. Sorry about that. Oh, not really sorry about it. Like you needed to know. So I thought, again, the placement in the middle of the book, the two you chapters right next to each other, that sorry, not sorry, like kind of such a teenage thing to say. So good. So what I've been talking about in this, without giving too much away of the storyline, because I think it's such a well-written book and I really like it to unfold to you as the reader, but I was really intrigued with the form that was used and really the way that the author kind of really helped us get rooted into the time period with all the points and pieces. And they never felt forced. It was just part of the narrative. Like I'd come home and he'd give us Tang and something else. Like it wasn't like, let me think of all the things that could happen in the 80s and kind of throw it in here. That's not how it was presented. It was a flow, but allowed you to really kind of be rooted in place. And I personally think adding in the magazine quizzes with like quotes from television shows and commercials at the time, as well as adding MASH in there, really helped us root into the teenage space in the 80s. So highly recommended. How to Commit Postcolonial Murder by Nina McConigley. Pick it up at your local bookstore or wherever you buy books. And I thank you so much for joining me today as we just have this conversation about how much I love books and how I really like to investigate form. And this was a perfect example of the way that form enhanced the story as a whole. Wishing you all the best, and I hope to see you next time.